Я радий вітати в Києві мою нову латвійську колегу Байбу Браже. Вітаю її з призначенням на цю посаду. Ми не були знайомі до цієї зустрічі, але менше секунди у нас, я думаю, зайняло не просто знайомство, а встановлення справжнього щирого контакту. Так і повинно бути між українцями та латвійцями, незалежно від тих посад, які вони обіймають. Той факт, що вже через тиждень після призначення Байба прибула з першим двостороннім візитом в Україну, демонструє, наскільки потужною і послідовною є підтримка Латвії. І я дуже вдячний, принаймні мене поінформували, що вперше в історії міністр закордонних справ Латвії свій перший візит здійснює саме в Україну, а не в іншу Балтійську країну. Ми сприймаємо це дуже близько до серця і дякуємо за цей жест підтримки. Ми мали дуже плідні, детальні перемовини. Говорили про стратегічні речі, говорили про проблеми, які потрібно вирішувати вже сьогодні. Цінуємо рішення Латвії приєднатися до ініціативи Чехії з закупівлі артилерійських снарядів. Говорили про виробництво снарядів. Я, безумовно, дякую Латвії за лідерство в коаліції дронів. І ведеться зараз спільна робота над нарощуванням цього виробництва. Потрібно більше дронів, і тут українські та латвійські компанії можуть дійсно багато зробити. Я дякую також Байбі за те, що одразу після призначення на посаду міністра, вже під час участі в першому для неї засіданні Ради міністрів закордонних справ Європейського Союзу, вона зробила особливу увагу на необхідності посилення санкційного тиску проти Росії. Це дійсно актуальна тема. Санкції, конфіскація заморожених активів. Щось, очевидно, треба робити з так званим прайс-кепом на ціни на російську нафту. Над всім цим Байба буквально з першого дня роботи почала працювати. Ну і безумовно, як ми могли не поговорити предметно про європейську та євроатлантичну інтеграцію України, особливо про останню, оскільки Байба багато часу пропрацювала на високій посаді в НАТО, має дуже глибоке розуміння цього напряму. Тому ЄС і НАТО були також в центрі наших перемовин. Ще раз дякую за візит. І я не маю сумнівів, що ми матимемо не просто дуже плідне співробітництво, але і дуже результативне співробітництво.
Thank you very much, dear Minister Kuleba, dear Dmytro. We know each other for quite a long time. We both come from the diplomatic service, and you've been in the post for a long time, so I look forward working with you and hearing your advice also on all things practical, what does it mean being a foreign minister. As you said, it's my first week in the office. My first bilateral visit is to Kyiv. I already met and visited people at the thermoelectric station to really get introduced firsthand on what practical needs, but also to really learn and see the resilience and the ability of Ukrainian people and professionals to work, to continue provide the basic needs, to continue providing economic and political leadership. We had very fruitful conversations right now with the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, with Dmytro. Latvian support for Ukraine bilaterally is enormous. More than 1% of the GDP is coming as a help to Ukraine. Every year we will provide 0.25% of military aid to Ukraine. People are deeply, deeply involved in supporting Ukraine throughout the society, the non-governmental organizations, businesses, companies. Today I heard that our energy company, Latvenergo, will provide a new generator, a big 250 megawatt generator to Ukrainian electricity needs and energy needs. So it's across the country. But we also are very strong supporters of Ukraine joining both EU and NATO. And there, our own knowledge, our own understanding, what we went through when we joined, as unlikely it seemed at the time, will be very helpful for Ukraine, and that was part of the discussion. Great people, great country, and it's super good to be here. Thank you very much.
For a few brief questions, let's start with the Latvian media.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Indras Prāns, Latvian Radio. I have a question about circumventions of sanctions, and what are your opinions about on the measures that countries of European Union could adopt to better prevent Russia's circumventions of sanctions and to ensure that Russia is unable to obtain raw material, especially for military industry? Thank you. Дуже дякую. Paldies.
The question is to both of us or to both of us? Dmytro?
I think I should answer in English, right? What can I tell you? Sanctions work under two conditions. First, that you regularly step up pressure, sanctions pressure on a country. And second, if you regularly fight, close the gaps and buy channels that allow circumvention on sanctions. If you fail to do this on a regular basis, a respective country simply adapts to the new reality. So when you hear the argument that sanctions do not work, it's not true. Sanctions do work. But they work, but if you stop imposing new sanctions and fighting circumvention of sanctions, then they will not work. They will cease to work because country will adapt. And we see that our partners these days prefer to focus on fighting circumvention than on imposing new serious sanctions. And it's getting more and more difficult to agree on tough sanctions on Russia. This is just simply true. But the law works as I described it. You cannot be successful only by fighting circumvention if you are not imposing new sanctions simultaneously. So if it appears at a certain point that the sanctions on Russia will not be as efficient as expected, and today Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world, the only ones who should be blamed for this are the ones who oppose quietly in the non-public procedures and discussions imposition of new sanctions or fighting circumvention, resolutely fighting circumvention of sanctions. So yes, we have to work on it.
Thank you very much for the question. There are three elements in efficient sanction regime. One is constantly assessing the situation of the existing sanctions, what new sanctions need to be imposed. We are preparing the 14th package of sanctions, which will be adopted shortly by the EU. But that also concerns other countries in the world. The US has its sanctions regime, UK, but also other countries have indeed ensured that these restricted measures are there in various fields. Then second part, again, assessing the situation with regard to Russia and its war in Ukraine. Several elements that we have to take into account is that money that Russia has in its budget, its financing the war. So there we clearly see that significant amount of financial resources come from the trade of oils that Russia does. And there are elements where we think we all together can influence that. So ensuring oil cap, which is not only for G7 countries, but also European Commission, can do certain things. It's the efficiency of the existing transport of oil. You would have heard about Russia's shadow fleet, grey fleet, dark fleet. So making sure that those elements are dealt with properly, and there are different elements for each of those. Second big pillar is Russia's capabilities, so the parts of missiles, the parts of drones, the parts of other equipment it's getting, and there, indeed, both the EU countries, the European Commission, but also US and other friends have spoken quite a bit, not only with China, but other countries whose systems have been used for providing or finding its way into Russia. And don't forget that sanctions implementation, agreed sanctions implementation within the EU responsibility is national. Each country in the EU is responsible for implementing the joint EU sanctions. So there are conversations to be had with countries if we see that indeed sanctions are being avoided. As a border country, we have quite a bit of data that we are seeing, assessing, so I will in my visits be also indeed working on that. The third big pillar is the sort of longer-term equipment that Russia has, be it armored vehicles, be it tanks, be it others, and again that's machinery equipment where there are countries where Russia gets it from. So again, I'm not going to name here, but it's not EU countries, so we will have to sort of assess that. But that is not enough. For us also, the essential element is to include elements that we have found nationally, such as manganese ore, aluminium oxide in the EU sanctions. There will be import tariffs on Russian grain, again, in the EU to make sure that Russia doesn't get that money, and that's Ukrainian grain that we buy or our own grain that we buy. There is also the element of the Eurasian Economic Union having the customs union where the goods flow freely. So even if you don't export something into Russia, if you export it to elsewhere within that union, the goods flow freely. So we need to assess and impose the same type of regime towards Belarus as we have with Russia as an external border country. So there are specific elements, very practical elements that need to be done. Latvia is at the forefront of those efforts. We have also had national decisions that were imposed where the rest of the EU have followed. But of course, the most efficient way to achieve the objective, both limiting Russia's capabilities and ability to reconstitute its military capabilities, is collectively, not only the EU, but also with the other countries. So that's a pretty long answer, but it's straightforward. But furthermore, as we discussed with the minister, it's not only also Ukraine's military needs. Ukraine needs, of course, the air defense and other military things, but it also needs the ability to take out those Russian capabilities from where Russia is attacking. So long-range fires, deep precision strikes, artillery, and so on and so forth. So that is another element very clearly to make sure that not only Ukraine's cities are safe, that your energy infrastructure, everything that is needed here to function is functioning, but actually to achieve certain objectives in the war.
Ukrinform.
Distinguished Madam Braže, the question to you. Yesterday, the Latvian Minister of Defense announced that the coalition of drones and electronic warfare had gotten 500 million euros. I want to ask you, how will this money go along the way to become supplies to Ukraine? І, пане міністре, питання теж до вас. Наскільки Україна може, чи вже час говорити про результати роботи коаліції дронів? Наскільки Україна може покладатися на партнерів, як у контексті дронів та РЕП, про що говорять менше, але це також рятує життя наших бійців. Дякую.
Thank you very much. So there are several elements in the drone coalition. One is the actual drones, the physical drones, and there are several different types of drones. There are the easiest FPV drones, there are the medium range, the longer range ones. So all of those are being constantly assessed depending on Ukraine's needs and what Ukraine needs now, what it will need tomorrow. So that is a dialogue between the military and the businesses. It's going really well. Ukraine is able to very dynamically provide the information on what needs to be provided, so we are trying to respond as much as we can. It also concerns very practical things, what is built here, whether there is certain targeting or explosive or other elements that need to be provided. So the foreign ministers are not the best advisors in that respect, so it's essential. Our interest and practice is to ensure that there is that direct element of dynamic cooperation and providing Ukraine what it needs. And the second part is money, that we need money to do that, and that's where the 500 million comes from. There is a drone fund, and that drone fund will be used both for buying, producing, but also acquiring certain elements in that. And again, as much as I tend to think that foreign ministers are masters of all hands, I really recognize the limits of what we know and what we don't know.
Виробництво дронів – це, безумовно, найбільш динамічна галузь військової економіки. В Україні надзвичайно динамічно все розвивається. Наші партнери володіють технологіями, якими діляться з нашими компаніями, і вони створюють ще більш ефективні дрони. І я думаю, що найкращий результат того, що співробітництво в цій сфері є ефективним, є збільшення кількості дронів на фронті. Бо зрештою про будь-яку зброю, про її ефективність функціонування будь-якої коаліції говорить дуже простий факт. Стало більше цієї зброї на фронті, значить коаліція працює успішно. А не стало, значить коаліція працює неуспішно. По дронам ми бачимо збільшення постачань на фронт.
And the last one from Associated Press, please keep it short because we're running out of time.
Thank you. Is that working? Can I ask about the question of manpower which Ukraine needs to win the war? Minister Kuleba, do you think Ukraine's allies should be encouraging Ukrainian men of fighting age in their countries to come home? And will Latvia be doing anything in response to this new law on passport and consular services for Ukrainian men?
I think it's fair towards Ukrainian men who stayed in Ukraine and who work in the Ukrainian economy and who fight in the Ukrainian army. I think it will be fair towards them if men from abroad return to Ukraine and stand by them, by each other, in defending their country, the country that gave them everything. I would like to remind one fact. All men of conscription age who decided for different reasons to flee Ukraine since 24th February 2022 obtained legal status and social benefits in respective countries for only one reason, because they are citizens of Ukraine. And they owe everything they have now in these countries to this fact, their Ukrainian citizenship. If they came from different countries, they would probably be treated differently. And these men should not forget about this when they argue that the state of Ukraine owes them something. They should not forget that they owe much more to the state of Ukraine. I personally, my job as foreign minister, my job as diplomat, has always been to support Ukrainians abroad. And I will continue to do so by all means available to me. But as I mentioned, it's about justice. Justice in a relationship between Ukrainian men abroad and Ukrainian men inside of Ukraine, and justice in the relationship between the state of Ukraine and the citizen of Ukraine. And yes, of course, we count that other governments will share this logic and this approach in assessing the presence of Ukrainian men of conscription age in their countries.
We support Ukraine's government's aims in that respect to ensure that both Ukrainian armed forces, economy, society has sufficient qualified and different skilled peoples that it needs. Ukraine is fighting for all of us. It's our security too. So we will be in dialogue with our Ukrainian counterparts to ensure that everything is done what is necessary. The practical aspect to that is, of course, that as better capabilities, both military capabilities, reconnaissance, drone capabilities Ukraine has, as less manpower it needs, as more efficient it becomes on the front, less human losses, so it goes hand in hand, and we won't forget that. And the third element, indeed, in all that is also the unity of Ukrainian nation, which is so greatly admired. Ukrainians in Latvia contribute and have integrated very well in Latvia, and we highly appreciate that, and they remain Ukrainians. So they remain Ukrainian citizens whom we respect, appreciate, and who have had, of course, all the support from us. If Ukrainian government raises this call of arms, it's to all of us. There are Latvians here, also in Ukrainian armed forces, and supporting Ukraine in different ways, and indeed that is something that we fully support.
Thank you, Excellencies. At this we conclude. Thank you, media.
Full gift. I have a new scarf, Ukrainian scarf. Thank you.